Welcome to episode 14 of HEO Manufacturing Conversations with Brent Balinski. In this episode, we hear from Dr. William Crowe and Dr. Hiranya Jayakody from HEO Robotics. The pair began HEO while they were PhD candidates at UNSW Sydney a few years ago, initially with a focus on asteroid mining. Today they are pursuing a beautifully simple goal to image anything within the solar system on demand, and last month they launched their first publicly available product. HEO currently uses other companies' satellite-mounted cameras to do their work, pointing and clicking with enough precision to capture objects moving by at 15 kilometres per second relative velocity. However, they've begun assembling their own at their office in Sydney's CBD and have just bought a factory in Botany as manufacturing becomes more important to their ambitions. Thanks for downloading this episode. If you enjoy the conversation and you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a review via the podcast platform of your choice, and help us spread the word. Good afternoon, William. Thank you very much for joining us here on HEO Manufacturing Conversations.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Brent.
No worries. Yeah, first question, as always, how did you get here and what do you make?
How did I get to form HEO Robotics, the company?
Let's go with a skim of your professional background, please.
HEO Robotics is, I'll just pitch it first, it's a company that images satellites and other objects in space that people care about, and it does it from additional satellites in space. So you fly by with a satellite, it has a camera on it, and then you image another spacecraft as it flies past. And then from that imagery, you're able to tell something about the object that you're going past. So it's really helpful for people that can't identify satellites in space, for example, which is a big and growing problem. But also when things go wrong in space, there's no repair person up there or someone just to inspect things and see what's going on. So we inspect these objects to help people understand better their satellites, which is sometimes worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. So pretty valuable. But how I got here, I actually came from an academic background. I was doing a PhD in spacecraft swarms, I guess you should say, but specifically to investigate asteroids for the purpose of asteroid mining, which we can get into.
I'm sure we will.
As required. But yeah, it turns out the exact same technology is very useful for doing what we call flyby inspections of satellites and other space objects as well. So the idea is that we're looking at space objects, huge problem, massive growing market, with the vision that we'll be able to inspect and look at any object in space whenever we want in all of the solar system. So anywhere between here and Pluto, I guess, in the future.
It's quite a jurisdiction.
Yeah, it's big.
You're working at it.
That's right.
So what you're doing is you have other people's satellites, as I understand, correct me if I'm way off the mark, as I sometimes am. You are using other people's satellites, you have their cameras as well, and you're using them to point and click and get imagery of other satellites or perhaps other debris or what have you that's floating around up there.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a software play at the moment. It's pretty hard because these things are flying really fast. So 15 kilometers per second relative velocity is not out of the question. So it's really hard to line up these imaging opportunities, but we practice, train over time, get it done. And then I guess the most exciting thing is that we're moving towards a situation where we have our own cameras going up. So not every satellite has a camera aboard. There's about 500 cameras total in space today. We want that to get up to at least 2,500 to fulfill our ambitions. And so the way to do that is to supply the cameras as well. And so we're doing a bit of manufacturing based on what we've learned from people's cameras today. And we're building those cameras right here in Australia and then providing them to people who would send up satellites, not necessarily with a camera, but this provides them with an additional source of revenue and allows us to take images of things in orbits where we wouldn't normally have cameras, say.
And so the camera making work, is that in cooperation with Infinity Avionics, or is that?
Yeah, so Infinity Avionics is one of our suppliers. So we're the, I guess, final builder and integrator of the cameras, but they build the electronics back end. And then we've got a few other suppliers in Canberra and Sydney as well that help us with the optics, the baffles, with the casing, and then we put it all together at the moment in our offices just here.
Right.
But we'll be starting to transfer over to Botany soon. Got a facility out there that we've just booked, and we'll start doing the bulk of the manufacturing out there.
Fantastic. Well, last time we spoke very briefly at the HEO Inspect launch, you mentioned that you had some exciting manufacturing news to share. So I guess that's it, and that is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess probably the most exciting thing is that the majority of the supply chain is here. Things like the chips can't be built in Australia right now, but the majority of the rest of the parts can. And then we put them all together here in Australia as well, mainly in the Canberra and Sydney regions. So I think that's a good news story, and obviously then having the software to run that's the last piece, and then the business can work after that.
We might return to some of that stuff a little later, but your co-founder and the company's CEO, Dr. Hiranya Jayakody, has just joined us. Would you like to introduce yourself, perhaps?
Hi, I'm Hiranya Jayakody, co-founder and CTO of HEO Robotics. Pretty much look after the tech side of things, as the title describes. Yeah.
And so it might be interesting, perhaps, if you're willing to share the origin story. You two both met at a global balloon challenge of some kind, if memory serves, 2015, I believe. That's not the place where everyone who starts a company meets. It's quite novel and therefore interesting. Yep. Tell me about it, please.
So both of us was studying at UNSW Sydney. I was following my PhD in mechatronics engineering, and Will his PhD in aerospace engineering, and we met through a mutual friend. And Will, with a couple of his friends, planning to take part in global space balloon challenge, where you launch a helium-filled balloon with an interesting payload to the stratosphere, 30 to 40 kilometers above ground, and then capture data, scientific data. And given my background, I joined the team to help with the software development and kind of embedded electronics design to capture imagery, store data, things like that. That's how we became kind of friends. And I think in a couple of years, the team won a couple of awards for some scientific experiments as well as part of that challenge. And then kind of that led to friendship, more work together, and then when Will pitched the idea of, instead of just air, like sky, like why don't we go to like space and have cameras kind of observing asteroids and all other interesting things in space. Like I was obviously kind of intrigued and was keen to kind of take part on that, and that's how we kind of got started.
Yeah, another early days sort of thing that might be of interest to listeners is the early focus on asteroid mining, and because I think if I've understood correctly, you did an undergrad thesis and you concluded it wasn't possible to do asteroid mining, then you got sort of curious again, and you thought maybe it is possible, and now is it on the back burner, or are you still sort of tinkering with the idea? Tell me about your relationship, please, Will, of with asteroid mining.
Yeah, totally.
Strangest of subjects.
It is a strange subject. So just for listeners, I guess it is what it says, where you get materials that are on asteroids, which are rocks hurtling through space, and then you use those materials generally in space to create structures or do whatever you need, build things in space. And the idea is that you're using resources in situ. So you don't need to lift them off Earth, which consumes a lot of fuel. You can instead use things that are already in space. And so during an undergrad, I was like, wow, this is the way to make space exploration a reality. So I did my undergrad research on asteroid mining, concluded it wasn't feasible. And the reason for that was it was a chicken and egg situation. So to make asteroid mining really feasible, you needed big industry in space. But in order for asteroid mining to even get started, you needed really cheap way of getting all that equipment up there. So it's like you needed the industry to get the asteroid mining started, but you needed the asteroid mining to feed the industry as well. So this chicken and egg scenario, my engineer's brain couldn't get around that. So I was like, okay, time to get out of space. It feels like this isn't going anywhere. But then what happened a couple of years later, a few asteroid mining companies started out of the Silicon Valley region And I was so taken with this. I was like, wow, time to get back into the industry. Did a PhD to really help these companies and do some great research to make sure that they could succeed. But what we didn't realize at the time was that their business models weren't quite figured out. So we'd created this company. I pitched Hiranya with this great idea to look at heaps of asteroids and provide prospection data to these companies. But we went to Silicon Valley, had a chat to them, and realized that their business model wasn't quite ready. And so what we do at HEO Robotics today is, I wouldn't say it's diverging from that goal, but it's saying, okay, what are the steps we can take to get to that goal rather than going straight there? So having lots of different cameras that can look at lots of different space objects, it's all the same stuff. It's just a slightly different class of object that we're looking at today. And really, we're just still on that mission to observe everything that we can.
You may have said last time we spoke that, or one of the other times we spoke that, it was a little like, SpaceX wanting to go to Mars, but along the way there are a lot of things you have to solve, and you're doing some of that.
Yeah, it's totally like that. And SpaceX were like, okay, let's go to Mars. And then they realized they needed to build the rocket to get up there. Fortunately, we don't have to do that at HEO Robotics because SpaceX has already solved that challenge, but there are all these other challenges that not one company can address. So there's all these great spaces that we can evolve into on our mission, and then other companies on their mission can evolve into other great spaces as well, and that's what produces that beautiful economy going forward. So
a lot of tricky problems and a lot of niches if you're smart enough. Right.
It's the only trick.
I saw an article a few weeks ago in the Fin saying that you're trying to get a magic number of 2,500 cameras in orbit. Tell me, what's the significance of that number, and so we can understand it, why you want that many?
Well, first I guess this came from discussions with various people who were talking about large networks of cameras, and it's almost like thinking about your iPhone today. So it used to be that you needed paparazzi, I guess, with very long telephoto lenses to get images of interesting things happening around Sydney, for example. Now you've got everyone with an iPhone. So you just need to put the word out for people in the right space at the right time to take a photo. So similarly, when we're thinking about imaging in space, huge distances involved, massive logistics problem, and you can either build really exquisite cameras like the James Webb Space Telescope, huge, ginormous $20 billion camera, or you can have a series of reasonably cost-effective cameras that are distributed in just the right way. So that's the way that we're taking the distributed system. And 2,500 cameras is significant because we think the number of satellites that will be in space in a few years' time will be about 100,000. So today the number is close to 7,000 satellites in space, but the number is almost doubling every year. So we'll get to that 100,000 number soon. And if we've got that many satellites, we need at least 2,500 looking out for them. So with the number of inspections that we expect every year, then we need roughly that number to make sure that we don't have too much load on any one camera, and to really get that cadence of inspecting, looking at things, making sure they're okay, making sure something's not fallen off them, and then if something has, being able to go forward and make adjustments before an explosion or something nasty happens.
I'd like to know a little more. You made a helpful analogy there with iPhones and the paparazzi industry. I think what you're doing may be a little more complicated than that.
Somewhat,
sure. How did you get, you're getting companies to share their asset and to do something useful when they wouldn't be using it? How did you get all these people to buy into this vision? And that's probably, that could fill hours of discussion, but tell me in a nutshell how that happened.
Yeah, so it's actually super difficult. So a lot of these companies have usually one large company, or one large customer, I should say, usually the government of the nation from where they launch. And generally there's a few smaller commercial clients as well, but generally they don't have a large number of clients. So it is very difficult to buy from them. They're just not used to having many customers. That said, I think that's really changing. So there's more commercial players coming into the market. More people are realizing the power of space, and we're just one of those companies. But what we realized after starting to work with these organizations with cameras already, they're generally Earth observation companies, so they're looking at land. But half the time it's nighttime, 70% of Earth is water. It's cloudy most of the time, about 60% of the time. So once you factor in all those different situations that happen over Earth's surface, they're only being utilized about 5% of the time. So about 70% of the time, we can utilize these same satellites. Mm-hmm. So pretty much when they're over the middle of the ocean, they're not expecting anything below them, we can utilize that satellite to look at something else as it's flying past and really improve their revenue line. So it's really, it shouldn't be the main business of these satellite operators, but it's a really great secondary business and can really help them close their business case. So after talking with them for a long time, engaging with them, we were able to convince a few to get over the line. And now we've actually started a supplier program, and we're engaging with more and more of these companies and saying, hey, there's other ways to think about monetizing your satellites and really getting the most out of them.
Yeah, wow. The next thing I'd like to know is, and it's a bit of a jump from there to here, a quick look at your website. It has a really nice, really elegant purpose to image anything within the solar system on demand. And I think so many businesses struggle to work out what the hell they're actually doing, and that says it in a few words. And the good companies know the problem they're solving, basically. And it can be hard to articulate, and you've done it in a few words. How hard was it to zero in on that? And did it take a lot of mistakes and a lot of, okay, we're not doing this, we're doing this, we're not doing this, we're doing this?
Weirdly, and you probably know this from your own work, it's so difficult to get a simple message out there. Isn't it something like, I didn't have enough time to write that simple sentence, so I wrote you a novel or something along those lines. So I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but I think the same goes here. So it did take us a while to settle on the purpose, but it just comes from our own problem that we had, which was, how do we find out what's on asteroids, specifically as they pass really close to Earth? I just had this frustration of these, used to get email alerts when these asteroids were coming past. Then we actually kind of appified that in the early days of HEO Robotics.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah, no, they were great days. But it was just so irritating to have them pass by and then not be able to do anything with that information. So the next step for us was to think, how can we image these asteroids on demand? And it turned out there was no one solving that problem already. So we were so frustrated that we had to go out and solve the problem ourselves. Fortunately, it turns out other people have the same problem. Yep. They might not have realized it yet, but it's a big thing.
I mean, it's probably not like this, but I was just thinking about, what good comedy is when someone makes a point and they point out something that's been in front of you all along, and you can suddenly notice it. And I think it's in some way, I couldn't say exactly how. It's something like what you're doing, in that you've noticed something that has been a problem all along, and it's you pointed it out, and you can go, wow, now, but you're the kind of people to do it.
No, that's right. Sorry, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Regarding like zeroing in on the imaging everything on the solar system on demand, that I think part of the reason where we settled on that was like looking back at like after a while we started looking back at why we do the things that we do, and then we kind of identified, we take these decisions, but there are these patterns behind it. We are thinking like, we were looking towards like sustainability. We were thinking like this when we made this decision. So that when we kind of sat down and had a chat around that, we realized that, we are moving towards this goal kind of subconsciously.
Yeah.
Right? And then like the asteroids were always like a part of that. Part of the solar system as well. So why stop there? Like, we can push forward. We have the capabilities. So that's where we kind of ended up.
Another thing from that recent Finn article that was interesting, but I couldn't properly comprehend it, was was a thing about US satellite licensing laws preventing US companies from pointing their cameras where you can. And that's, I thought, oh, well, that's cool, but what does it mean and how does it work? A little clarity, please.
No, it's such an interesting situation. So the US, they've been doing space for a really long time. And people who know the US regulatory apparatus probably know already that there's a lot of weird contradicting rules out there in the US. And particularly in the aerospace field, there's a lot of rules that prevent US companies from doing things that might have first evolved in the military and intelligence community. And so the way that they protect those technologies is by preventing anyone in the US doing it. And then the idea is that that prevents other people in the world doing that same thing. So this kind of thing that we're doing right now, we only realized recently that the US has been doing this for about 50 years in the intelligence and defense domains. It used to be called SAT-squared technology. Okay. So we're really surprised to find this out. They kept the secret well hidden, but that's only come out recently. But the regulatory environment that surrounds that means that no commercial company in the US can do what we do because it has this legacy in that intelligence domain. And until recently, the majority of satellites were government satellites anyways, so there was no need for a commercial entity like us to do this kind of thing. So things change really rapidly, but the regulations in the US are really lagging everything else. Yeah. Now, the great thing about being in Australia is that we never had a space industry until really recently. So we never had that regulatory apparatus in place, except in a few very small fields. And that's allowed us to help change the game and the way things are viewed in the US, because what we're doing right now should have been started in the US or should have been started in another spacefaring nation, because it's so important for sustainability in orbit. But I think being in Australia, that's actually leapfrogged us ahead because of the great regulations that we have here. And people in the US are really pleased by that, actually, because this is the kind of change that they needed to see. So I think, turns out we can do great things here in Australia, and sometimes it's for surprising reasons.
Well, it's always good to hear them. How crowded are the orbits that governments and companies are using at the moment?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. So space is just absolutely ginormous. Like, it's mind-boggling. And so things are generally pretty far apart in space. The problem is that if two things meet, they're generally in space, they're generally coming together at very high speed. And so in the unlikely event that something actually does get close, things can smash into each other and break apart pretty easily. So I guess the answer is kind of twofold, which is that space is not crowded from a things near you point of view, but if something does hit you, then it's bad. And the likelihood of things hitting each other does increase with the more stuff that we're putting up there, and especially very large objects, because if you've got more surface area, it's more likelihood that you'll hit something else. So maybe not the quick and dirty answer you were after, but I think, there's a little bit of nuance, and that's kind of why this weird dichotomy is in place right now.
Appreciate the honest answer. You could have just said, oh, well, you can't swing a cat. That's why we exist.
You can definitely swing a cat. No, but it's interesting because, I think even though that nuance exists, it's still incredibly important to be sustainable, because that saves you so much money if you're looking after your satellite. And the more, I guess, smithereens are smashed in space, the more likelihood that one of those smithereens will hit something else. And then there's this effect that we call the Kessler syndrome, where things that have smashed off satellites start to hit other things that have smashed off satellites, and there's this knock-on effect. Now, it's kind of like climate change. That won't be a big deal for probably another few hundred to 1,000 years, if gone unmitigated. But I think the great news is that doing a little bit of work and being a little bit sustainable today can have huge, good implications in the future.
Point of view, space is big, but there are contested orbits.
Sure.
Everywhere. So like you see these concentrations and then like nothing for a while and then concentrations. So how those kind of contested orbits kind of evolve over the next 10 years would be pretty interesting, because we are talking about different countries with their own government and commercial programs. So there might be interesting players when it comes to like debris and kind of accidents.
Another bit of nuance to the answer.
Yeah.
It did, yeah.
Appreciate.
Yeah.
If you can tell us, please do, and you might not be able to, but who are your customers, and is it true that it's about 80-20 breakdown of government and private, as I remember hearing on a podcast about a year ago, I think it was?
Yeah, that's right. So that number is still about right today. So customers that we can talk about, so the Australian Defence Force is a customer, which is great. They have a big presence in space, a lot of satellite communications that they need to really ensure are always working. And then there's some commercial providers as well. So one we can talk about today is Space Machines Company.
Yep.
They're actually based here in Sydney and in Adelaide as well, and doing great things. And we're really stoked to have them and a number of other commercial clients, because it means that they care about sustainability and their bottom line.
Yep.
But they're really going out of their way and being early adopters of this technology, so they can really make sure they're being a good player in space.
So as Space Machines Company, I think it was last year or the year before perhaps, there was an announcement that you were going to be on one of their taxis aboard a Gilmour Space Aeris rocket. Is that closer to happening, and what do preparations look like for that?
Well, we're a Space Machines Company customer. We're not a Gilmour space customer for their rocket, but we do hope that we'll be able to be on satellites that launch on their rockets. But that's still going ahead in April.
Yeah, so the first
year.
launch, the Optimus 1 launch is happening May next year.
Okay.
So we finished our home's camera build last week, so pretty much like delivering the engineering model next week.
Yeah.
So that's going ahead.
Yeah.
And then we are doing the initial testing and then final integrations around November, December period.
But this is one of 3 that we have going up next year.
Yes.
And
one of at least 3.
At least 3, and hopefully many more as well.
Yeah. By 3 we mean like those 3 launches are like locked in.
Yeah.
For cameras, but we are open for other opportunities.
Yeah.
Exploring more opportunities as well.
We've got a lot to get up.
I wanted to get a sense of what your team looks like currently. Got a chance to meet some of them, or at least interfere with their office space a moment ago. Tell me about some of the talented men and women. Tell me about some of the disciplines involved in doing what you do, and some of the skills on your team.
Yeah, geez.
Where do you start?
No, definitely. So I think, we have probably more engineers than anyone else on the team, but we've even got a sociologist, a couple of sales experts, and some real experts in operations as well. Yeah, I think what's interesting about HEO Robotics, so we started hiring a lot of women recently, and I think having a good amount of women on your team brings others as well, which is different for an engineering organization.
Yeah.
We're really happy that that's happened, because it gives us different perspectives in the team, and we've got really talented men and women on the team, which is great. We also have a lot of people with PhDs on the team, so it's over 30%, which is great. And I think HEO Robotics, because what we do is so novel and unique, we're attracting a lot of people that want to really contribute to changing what happens in space today.
Yep.
And so we've been quite fortunate, I would say, in attracting new people, and we encourage people to think differently, because that's the only way that I think an Australian company can compete with great companies in the US and Europe.
Sure. Being, overwhelmingly staffed by engineers, is it difficult to find engineering talent here? Obviously they're in high demand and have been for a while, and we just simply don't make enough of them in Australia.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, because that feels true. We haven't had much trouble in some disciplines, but more trouble in others. So in software, there was definitely a big tightening of the market early this year. It's relaxed a lot now with not as much money being pumped into the system. But yeah, so we were lucky to get a few good software engineers. But also, yeah, there are some niches where not many people are hiring engineers. So I think a lot of people get into the discipline because they have some passion. And so at HEO, we're able to really help them realize that passion. And so that's been really helpful for us with people that wouldn't otherwise necessarily even be considering the workforce. They'd be staying in academia. So yeah, I'd say, again, sorry, a nuanced answer, but we're finding it difficult as well as easy, depending on the discipline that we're after. And really, we're kind of trying to fill in this, or building the puzzle as we fill it in. So we're not looking for someone of a particular shape necessarily. We're looking for people that can tessellate together and fill in the bigger picture.
Good answer. And so about what's the headcount here?
We're up to 18 employees, which
majority of the team is in Sydney, Australia, and we have a couple of team members in London, UK.
Yeah, and our first team member in the US, in Los Angeles.
That
When did they start?
Yeah, only a month ago.
Okay.
We're very excited about them.
Yeah, well, you'd want to have a presence over there.
Definitely,
Yeah, right. And so the news of today is, as we would have seen, the skilled migration announcement. So I think 30,000 odd new skilled migrants. I think something like 7,000 of them tech workers. I'm not sure of the exact figures. I have to go back and look at what it was. But tell me, what does that mean for you guys? You know, you haven't had huge issues in some ways, but you know, based on who you're dealing with, doing very specialized things that take incredibly smart people that we don't always have enough of. Tell me about your views on that news, please.
Well, no, you're totally right, and what I didn't mention in my last answer is that getting people that have done space before is really difficult in Australia, and we don't want to poach from other space companies in Australia. We want to grow the ecosystem. So a great way to do that is to get people from overseas. We're actually pretty lucky. We've had 2 people who have global talent visas on the team, and so yeah, we think that program's brilliant, and that's about getting the best of the best over into Australia, and I think we've got a lot to offer. Something that's been really interesting to me is a lot of Americans who are well versed in the space industry are coming to Australia to work here in our nascent space industry. So I think that's really exciting, and a lot are using the global talent visa and some other visas. So yeah, I think it's great news for our sector at least. And yeah, I think that was a really good announcement.
I don't think I've heard a criticism of it so far.
No,
I've looked around a little, but I
mean, with COVID, everyone was really struggling because we are a nation of immigrants. So yeah it's hard.
If it's not been covered above, HEO Inspect, is there anything you'd like to share about that recent launch and what it offers?
Yeah, I would love to. So HEO Inspect, for everyone listening, is HEO Robotics' first publicly available product. It's the first product available worldwide by any company that you can just come to our website, request to look at your satellite, and then a few things happen in the background, and then you can get those images and the insights that come along with them. So if something happens to your satellite, you can get results back really quickly and really address any issues that might be present. So yeah, first in its world, invented right here in Sydney in Australia. And yeah, really changing the way space is done.
So since the launch, have you been flooded with inquiries?
Yeah. We didn't expect it to work as well as it did. Yeah, we're really excited to have it out there and get a few people signing up. So yeah, really, really stoked to launch the product. Yeah, after waiting so long as well. It's been in beta for a while, so it's great to have it out there.
Yeah, what was the beta period like, and what did you tweak and learn from customers? Because you're always learning from customers.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it'd be fair to say it was out in the wild in some form for about 12 months before the launch. Do you think that's fair?
In a couple of forms, the more recent form released like February this year or so.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we should be really thankful for the early adopters who provided us with the feedback on the usability and what their needs are, because you need something
Mm.
to get feedback.
Yeah.
So that something was there for 12 months, which then kind of allowed us to kind of release version 1 of HEO Inspect. So the main changes that happened was like it kind of transformed from like an engineer's tool to something anyone can use. So we are getting that feedback now. So if you are like a non-technical user, you can just like get in, doesn't scare you. You can task
Right.
set like that sort of thing. So I think we are moving in the right direction in that part. And the other one is like scalability of everything while thinking about security as well. So we are making like major strides there.
It might have fit better in the questions above where you were, what was that word, Kessler syndrome. I'd never heard that before. I've written it down so I can look at it Wikipedia.
Oh, please. Yeah.
We're talking about stuff flying around and space junk. I wanted to ask about 2022 as a coming of age year for space junk appreciation. Is that fair to say? And what does, as people who've been concerned with this for a while, what does it look like to you?
It does seem like something's changed this year. I'm not sure quite what, but yeah, people seem more concerned than ever about space junk. And yeah, some of the recent news events have been quite shocking. So for example, there was SpaceX, or part of a SpaceX spacecraft that fell on farmland in Australia. I think the latest update I've seen is 4 pieces across various different farms. And that's scary for a couple of reasons. First off, it's not meant to fall to Earth whole. So it's meant to have burnt up. It shouldn't have fallen on Australia. It should have fallen in ocean, and a number of other reasons. So basically it shouldn't have happened that way. And I think what we're seeing at HEO Robotics is a number of objects that are unidentified, so we don't know even where they've come from or who belongs to them. We generally know they're man-made, so we've actually started to identify some of them. We've got what we call
Object K?
no UFO policy. Object K. We released a report about that just after T-. And yeah, that's important for a number of reasons. First off, so we can get further details from the organization that owns the object. So we can do a trajectory calculation and figure out where it might land, hopefully on ocean, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And yeah, really other things as well. So understanding if something's can be maneuvered or if it's truly debris is really important. Understanding if it's still in one piece or if maybe a few pieces splintered off. That really helps us understand where it might land as well. And yeah, if things land on Earth, sometimes there's a cleanup bill involved too. So understanding who to bill. In the 70s, there was a famous example where I think it was the town of Esperance in Western Australia gave a cleanup bill to NASA, and I think they have paid it now. But but it was only because only because they knew who owned the object. So that's important as well. So
I wanted to ask about suppliers for you guys. I think we spoke in 2019, as I said, and you said you were having some difficulties finding the right kinds of suppliers for what you were looking for.
Yeah.
Have things improved, and what would you like to say about what you're working with?
Yeah, definitely. So we named one of our suppliers Infinity Avionics. We think they're doing a really great job, and we're really excited about the capability that they have. They've been working in space for a long time. A lot of the employees come from academia, so they're able to get that experience there and apply that in business, which is great. I'd say another thing, and Hiranya, tell me if I'm wrong, is that we've co-developed expertise with some of our other suppliers, like our optics suppliers, for example, thought they might be able to do something, and then we worked with them to figure out what was possible, what isn't yet possible. And that really helped us get great capability here in Australia, and then figure out what the supply chain should look like when you bring that kind of capability from academia into a production type environment. Did you want to add anything?
No, 100%, because like COVID sort of forced our hand, like because we were exploring, but then COVID's like, nah, everything's
your options have just shrunk.
So then we looked into like ideas that were like kind of here and there inside universities. That's a cool idea. Why don't we push it as hard as we can while we are in isolation, right? And so we kept pushing different kind of ideas, and then realized together that, okay, we can actually pull this off. We can actually manufacture this at this accuracy. We got it wrong for the first 3 times, but the 4th time is wrong, and like it got correct. We need this additional thing, add that. Okay, performance better. So we really arrived at like a very interesting point. Like very excited now. Like Will obviously told you about Holmes, the first camera, but the confidence that we gained from building that camera and testing it and kind of seeing the performance, we've already moved on to the next version of the camera, which we call Adler. Like a larger aperture, better performing camera. So now we have that snowball effect, which kind of started off in a very weird manner, but now it's like it's full flow.
Fantastic.
So it's I find that very kind of fascinating, because there are all this like talent and interesting ideas out there. Can be time to kind of explore that properly. A lot can be done in Australia.
A recurring question on this series is, why is it important that Australia have a strong manufacturing ecosystem? I'd love to get your take on that.
Well, right now I think it's pretty obvious to everyone with supply chain issues, like shortening that supply chain, is pretty critical. And even for us, we like to keep things as close to where we're based, where the integration's based as much as possible. So, we'd love everything to be here in the Sydney Basin. We do need to use facilities in the ACT as well. But we think that's so critical. Reducing the logistics hurdles is really important to us. So even for that reason alone, it's really important to have that expertise here. But I think probably the other reason is the ability to iterate. So where we're able to get to with our suppliers wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have people close by, so we could work with them more closely, being in the same time zone during COVID, just via Zoom, and then being able to meet people as well and see their facility in the flesh. All of that stuff is helpful to really getting to cutting edge solutions. So super important.
Good answer.
And we can be like we can be on the driving seat rather than being one of the customers for a bigger facility. So that allowed us to move fast as well.
The last question, as always, is, do you have anything to plug, or do you have perhaps a final comment to make?
Yeah, totally. Well, we'd love feedback on HEO Inspect, so you can go to inspect.heo-robotics.com and make a login and sign up there. But we'd also love people to reach out if they'd like to work with us at HEO Robotics. We're doing some cutting edge stuff in space, and we'd love to work with more really smart and really great people. So,
Awesome. Well, Hiranya, thank you very much for joining us on AU Manufacturing Conversations.
Thanks, Brent. Cheers.